Welcome back to the show. Today we've got Scott Allen. He's a professor, a leader. He really brings to life what it means to grow as a leader, right? He's going to coach you and give you some insight that maybe you haven't seen before. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. I'm excited about having Scott on. Scott, welcome.
Thank you, sir. It's good to be here. Excited for the conversation.
When we talk about podcast, we talk about leaders and we start to look at them. One of my favorite lines of yours, why don't you tell the audience?
Who you are is how you lead.
Right. Who you are is how you lead, right? So how many of us really get that, right? How many people get that our thoughts, actions, and behaviors as a leader are really what causes the organizations that we lead? And let's jump into that a little bit and how you come up with, that's a really clear statement.
Well, it's Bob Hogan. Bob Hogan said that, but I have latched onto it. And that one quote, Anthony, keeps my mind cooking. It just does, because there's a whole world underneath that quote. Underneath that quote is your personality. It's your level of optimism. It's your resilience. It's your conscientiousness. Under that quote is your actual knowledge about leadership. So there's a lot of people who are in positions of authority, right? They have the role, so to speak, but what do they actually know about the activity of leading others? I think underneath that quote is also your skill at negotiation, inspiring others, communication. I mean, there's so much underneath that. I look forward to exploring that with you. But for me, that one quote, it just, and you know what I really love about it? I think you could put another word at the end of that statement. Who you are is how you parent. Who you are is how you partner. Who you are is how you coach, how you teach. So the question is, who are you? That matters greatly. That matters. It's a very, very important question.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people think that leaders are a way of being, and I'm like, no, and maybe so. Maybe there is some tactic to it, but you might get away with it for 30 seconds or 30 days, or you might get away with a week, a month, but somewhere who you really are comes out, right? It doesn't last very long, the show that you are. It really has to be about who you be. And I think all the work that we've done, it boils right back to that same thing. Who are you really? And then as the work that we do as leaders, right, start to really dive in to figure out, all right, where am I holding back myself, my organization, my community, my family, right? Some of the thoughts, actions, and behaviors that I am, really do create the drama, the twist, the inability to really grow. And, right, I see it all the time.
Yeah. I think so. One way of thinking about this, which is really interesting, is yes. I mean, if I am an individual who it's called self-serving bias. When something hasn't gone well, I tend to externalize that. It's their fault. It's others' fault. So that's who that person is. Now, there's also individuals where when they're not getting the results they want, they kind of go in and at least put it through the filter of, okay, what do I need to potentially own in this? Maybe I didn't make the goal smart, or maybe I was avoiding the conversation too long, or maybe I wasn't super clear on what the expectation was. And so I think it's really, really important. There's a habit of mind. If who you are is an individual who reflects, takes ownership, if you're an individual who is constantly trying to examine what I need to own in the situation, what I can do to be better, well, that's what shows up to the team. If you're a person who's always trying to become a better version of yourself, so there's a woman, Carol Dweck, she wrote the book Mindset. Listeners, download this book, Mindset. It's incredible. It will shift how you think about parenting. It'll shift how you think about leadership. It'll shift how you think about life. But she has this quote, and it's becoming is better than being. And so who are you becoming? And kind of what is your system? If you're in a position of authority, if others are in your care, what's your system for becoming a better version of you each and every day? And for me, that's 20 years of studying leadership and writing about leadership and engaging with leaders and consulting. It kind of comes back to that. Each one of us has an area that we need to grow in, that we need to develop in. None of us have arrived. So what is your system for completely always, every week, week after week, becoming a better version of you?
I see it all the time in that great leaders get vulnerable, right? They
Yes.
start to look at themselves and go, all right, where else? First of all, they take the responsibility. Like, it's not them, it's me, right? And how I love what you were talking about, that the language they use, how I communicate with others. How could I be setting them up for failure, right? As if I look at me and take responsibility for me, then I have agency, right? If
Yes.
not, I become victim to those employees and that company and those clients and the government, and I become this victim. And in victim, I have no agency at all. Like there's really nothing I can do. I'm stuck, being there, being vulnerable to them.
Yes. Yes. And I think, again, if you're an individual where that's how you respond in those situations, that shows up to the team. So, of course, there's situations where it is those team members who have fallen down. It is those individuals who haven't done their part, of course. And all I'm saying is there a filter from the very beginning? Interesting. I'm not getting the results I want. What do I potentially need to own in this? Oh, geez, we haven't trained these individuals. I mean, you have a construction background, correct?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. So imagine it's 1990 and it's 1990 and we have a foreman and what have we done? Maybe they were a master carpenter, right? And we've
Yeah.
put them into a
Yeah.
position of authority.
Do it all the
And
time.
what do we do to truly prepare that person for this new job? Because it seems to me, push back, Anthony, if I'm wrong, but it
That's right.
seems to me that their new job is building relationships quickly, conflict management, problem solving, and negotiation, like all day long. And oftentimes I'll come across individuals that are like, yeah, our leaders aren't cutting it. They aren't doing their part. And I want to say, well, what have we done to prepare them? Have we put them through? They're, by gosh, we're going to make sure they know how to work with pine and maple, and they're a master craftsman, right? They're certified. But what have we done to truly prepare them to do this new work, which is totally a different job, which is not in any way, shape, or form the same thing? And now we're getting work done through others. Well, if they've had no training and they're just doing their best, that's who they are, and we're kind of leaving it up to chance.
It's not surprising when we do. I've done that 1,000 times, right? You take someone who's great at a job, and you're like, well, we're proud of them, and you're like, oh, great, I'm going to promote them into some other job, and now we don't set up the skill set for that, and figure that through, wait, look, they're going to be a great carpenter through osmosis, right? Through the field or hard knocks, whatever. But the problem is at leadership level. You don't have that time. There's a lot more people get impacted when we put bad leaders into groups,
Oh
right?
my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, we could affect whole teams of people, and that's where we got to look at it and go, all right, how, if we're going to promote somebody, what's the support team, what's the support learning? And by the way, I think that's happening faster and faster because look, we're looking to grow our organizations, and we have these opportunities, and now we want to bring people in and grow them, but we've got to work as hard on the training for them as much as anything else.
Well, okay, so let's take a healthcare example because the same thing happens in healthcare where you have an incredible phlebotomist. They take blood like no, you couldn't even feel the needle, and they're a good person. They show up on time. Everyone kind of likes them, and now we make them the, you know, charge nurse or the nurse manager. Well, again, rarely, other than their Press Ganey scores, which are their customer scores, their quality scores, and the P&L, are they given any training to now lead people. And it's almost like taking me, I have a PhD in leadership, and saying, Scott, you're a great person knowledgeable about leadership. Let's have you go do healthcare today. Right? Let's have you draw blood. Well, I would injure people. I would injure people for probably weeks on end or months until I actually got it, but there'd be destruction in my path. And I think at times in organizations, we wonder why some of the Gallup numbers suggest that a large percentage of Americans are not engaged at work. We wonder why. Well, I think we're putting people in positions of authority, leadership roles. And again, we haven't trained them. And who they are is a hopefully good-natured person who lacks the skill in this new role. Just like I would lack the skill in phlebotomy.
Well, I've done a lot of training, and one of the things I've really noticed that's a gift to great trainers,
Mhm.
right, is that I agree with you. Most people are lifeless in the workplace, and my
Mm.
belief is that somewhere we bring them in, that we skip the steps of training. They're struggling because look, I've never met yet. I've never an employee yet where I walk in the room as a leader. I say, do you got it? And they're like, right? I walk out, and then 3 weeks later, I'm like frustrated because nobody got it. Nothing got it. The transfer of information from my brain and idea over to their brain and idea did not transfer well. And, and then, then just frustration of, especially when I want to point out words, I go, you, no, 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 no. It's the three fingers pointing back at me going, it's you, me. Right.
Yep.
And I've learned that in great training, it's one of my favorite courses, and I'm going to use the word and be careful. I don't want to make. There was a group of Scientologists that had a course called the communication course,
Okay.
and I took it at some. I don't know, someone invited me to this communication course. Would you like to take it? I love taking interesting courses. And L. Ron Hubbard, whatever the religion is, but his training course was one of the best training courses I ever took. And what I loved about it was he started with this whole thing about communication. Like the piece was about how to learn to communicate anywhere, right? You could communicate in a room, no matter what was happening in the room, how to create great communication from my ideas, thoughts, and behaviors over to your ideas, thoughts. So you could duplicate the idea over in their brain. And it literally started with sitting in a chair, right? Like the idea was, there were very small lifts of training. Like the first part was sit in a chair, like just get present to sitting in the chair. And then the next one was be present to the room. It wasn't like staring at the room or just being in the room, to stop, not thinking about something else, just being in the room.
Yeah.
The next part of the training was sitting in front of somebody, like literally you sat knee to knee with somebody and you were just present to them. And then the idea was to, and it kept building on these small bits. And the next one was, I'll say something. So let's do an example. I'll say, and I want you to kind of complete the sentence.
Sure.
The ball is
red.
All right. The house is
square.
The fish is
golden.
Right here. And it just became this small little wins of back and forth. And then you'd build on that. Right. And then they'd learn you they would teach you to start and stop the conversation. Right. So they would build on all the communication tools. And by the time you were done, they had this practice called bull baiting. And bull baiting is an old Spanish practice where they would tie a bull to a tree and they would set the dogs off on it. And the bull would, would go nuts. And they would keep doing that until the bull could be calm. And that would make it, that a bull it was now ready to go work in the field with an owner, right? Yep. So you knew it would be safe and it wouldn't freak out. And they would get to the same place to be able to do the same thing with communication. Like literally they would have you be able to talk to someone like you and I are talking. Yep. And they'd have 6 or 8 people in the room saying the most obnoxious things. I mean, they would look at your personality, your hairstyle, your sex. I mean, they would literally be saying all kinds of things to try to throw you off. And you'd have to maintain a clear, communication piece, no matter what's happening in the room. So my judgment is that's training that works is in those small little lifts, right? I mean, and I don't think we do that. Most corporate America goes, welcome to the company. Here, drink off the fire hose. I'll see you in a couple of weeks and see how you do.
Yeah. I mean, I think a couple of things come to mind as I just like internalize what you just said. I mean, so one thing is, yes, when you walk into a room, you literally have hundreds of thousands of pieces of information in your head, and your mind is in such a different place of expertise than theirs. And I think at times leaders think they've communicated, but they really haven't. And because of the power difference, the person looks across from you and goes like this. Right. And unless you say, hey, I need you, I have not been in your shoes in 30 years. So I need you to hold me accountable to ensuring that you understand. And if I'm speaking in acronyms or if I'm going too quickly, you have permission to ask me to slow down and repeat. So that's one thing, because I think we've communicated. There's a quote about leadership and communication. If you are not tired of saying it, you haven't said it enough, right? I mean, it's going to take hundreds of times till it actually seeps into a human being's mind. So that's one thing. But then also, scaffolding. And so how do we scaffold learning appropriately so that, again, I mean, imagine just training a master carpenter. You are going to start not with black belt level concepts. You're going to start with, this is a piece of maple. At least I assume.
right. Just notice the grain, like the smallest lift you could do is like, here's what it weighs. Here's what it feels like. Just feel the structure before you.
Yes.
Right.
And we scaffold that learning so that the person can begin to build. But yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it really, really is. I mean, if you begin to really pay close attention, especially when you're not getting the results you want, I think this is true at home as well. But when we're not getting the results we want, what do we potentially need to own? And at least putting it through that filter, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn in just that one simple activity, right? And if that's who you are, I believe you're a step ahead than a lot of folks who are just ping ponging, right? Just day to day, getting through the day, stimulus response. To your point, no kind of centered intentionality behind the behavior, right? It's just, and it's hard because what a lot of these leaders are doing is Herculean. I mean, it just is what they're being put through.
Well, and we look, we're growing an amazing country. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's every once in a while, I feel like we all need to take a step back and go, look at, I mean, look what we've done. We've done some amazing stuff. We've blown the doors off of most of the world in our development and stuff we're doing. And by the way, we're all a little exhausted and nuts. And when people who are not exhausted and nuts work, you know, are overwhelmed, it's a recipe for disaster because,
Mm-hmm.
you know, just the frustrations is there. And just to notice that, okay, look, let's back up. I noticed some frustration in my team. I noticed there's a little infighting. So
Yeah.
it's a great time for us to step back and go, let's just go back to fundamentals. And one of my favorite things to do with the team, and I'd like to talk a little bit about with you, kind of what are the steps. One of the
Yeah.
favorite things I'd like to do is I love to get a team into process, right? I'd love to get them, you know, go back and go, let's really walk through this process. And, and like you said before, almost to the point where their ears bleed,
Mm.
right? Let's continue to go through process and really identify exact. So we're crystal clear on what each of those things mean. You know, when I say we're going to do this next, what does that really mean? And is everybody clear on that? Let's go through and make sure everybody has a well-defined understanding of this is next, right? What
Yes.
item number 2 is on our list,
What we
whatever that
forget,
is.
yeah, and what we forget as a leader with all of that expertise is that, there's a lot of content under some of those statements, right? There's a lot of definitions underneath even what is the, like, to you now, just a simple basic thing, where there's 10 things under that novice, they don't know. They don't understand that, right? And so, yeah, another thing I love, another quote that comes to mind for me, my friend Jonathan Reams says this, but leaders create the weather. And so what are the weather patterns we're creating? I mean, when an individual doesn't totally understand or hasn't produced the result we want, are we getting a little tornadic on them? Is it a hurricane? Is it hot? Right? Like you're in the Sahara, hot, the environment just gets really hot. Well, that's going to be scary. And I probably won't ask you a question next time. If I'm calm, it's a little gray, right? It might be sprinkling and drizzling out, but it's okay. And we're going to get through it. And yeah, I'll slow down and explain this to you. Well, that's a different weather pattern. So, that image of leaders create the weather, it's a fascinating image. And for me, I always come back to that as well. And you can take it in like 7 directions. One is, when someone asks you a question, how do you respond? Do you respond like, well, you're a dumbass, you don't know that? Or do you just kind of lash out, or do you make a sarcastic comment? Or do you slow down, pause, to your point, be present, and just help coach them up and move along the day, right? And so that quote, I think another reason that quote is important is that oftentimes there's a lot of good happening in the organization, a lot of good. And it's called inattentional blindness. Leaders are so focused on kind of those fires, the problems, the challenges. They're going from one of these. It might be a people problem, it might be a process problem, it might be a client problem, that literally they miss all of that good. And if they aren't helping shine some rays of light into the system, into the organization, there's a lot of missed opportunities. And Anthony, you know what it felt like to work for someone or a coach or a teacher who went months without acknowledging the fact that you were going above and beyond. That's a hard place to be. And all of a sudden, the grapevine starts to take over the weather pattern. And the grapevine is never a positive. That's always rainy and stormy and just not a happy place to be. It's not San Diego at all.
Well,
Right?
I venture to say that some of the best people I ever worked for, and maybe at the time, like I remember one of the leaders I worked for, it was exhausting. I mean, I worked tirelessly,
Yeah.
right? And now maybe there was a gift in that I was young, I was learning. One of the problems when I was young is I didn't know how much of a net to cast on things. So he would say something, and I didn't. There was no gauge for. I threw the big net at everything. Right. I just was overwhelmed by. Just my boss wanted. So I would just go overwhelmingly at it because I always said I may not be the have the most knowledge on it, but I'm going to work harder than anybody
Nice.
here. And
Yeah.
there was something about that I believe made me the leader I am today. One was learning things pretty well, and but you know, I don't think that person was the best leader, but there was something that they were able to do that was surprising.
Yeah.
You know, I had to leave that. I had to leave that leader because I got to the point where it was overwhelming and it was actually rude and very, kind of dismissive and physically, he was physically a brute, right? One day he came and stood on my desk and he
Oh,
yelled
wow.
at me because, he yelled at me because something happened on a project. It was a store that we were building and the power
Yeah.
company didn't deliver something and he like cussed me out. And I
Yeah.
remember thinking to myself, look, I'll be pushed, but that's enough. Right. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
I went and said, all right, that's where I went from I'll do anything to now you've broken
Lost you.
me.
He
Yeah, you
lost you.
lost me. Right, right.
Yeah.
And that takes a second. And my guess is that him as a leader, right? I try to look back now, and maybe as I say it, I'm noticing, somebody was on his ass, right? And he made a
Mm.
promise to operations or something, and he goes unconscious and walks in my office and stands on my desk because that's an unconscious behavior,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. You're not working out of a place of my next best move is.
Yeah, right. That's an unconscious behavior walking
In
in and
business
standing.
school, they taught
Yeah,
me to go ahead and stand on the desk now. No, no.
no, there's no, and that would be so. In there, I can look back and have some grace for the human being and go, all right, there was no pause between his ability to do that.
That's
Yeah,
that's who he was.
yeah,
That's who he was. Good, bad, ugly. And there were some benefits to him, and there were probably some things you learned.
yeah.
And then who he was an individual that when pushed would stand on your desk. And that's, again, from a weather standpoint, one other reason I love that quote: what's weather over time? Climate. What's another word for climate? Culture. I mean, is that the climate I want to be in? No, that sounds like not a very pleasant climate. I don't want to exist
No,
here, right? You know what I'm saying?
no.
It's fascinating.
His thing was meticulous. He was meticulous about every detail, right?
Mm,
The stores and restaurants we built, he was meticulous. Like everything mattered. I remember like we would do a punch list or we'd do a walkthrough with operations, and whatever the smallest little item was, he would teach you that matters, right?
yep,
That their success at opening matters by. And I'm like, but that's a little piece, some paint touch up, but look, if you want to be meticulous, it starts with everything here mattering. So from that point of view, I think I learned some stuff. Now
mhm,
the next guy I go to work for, from there, the company transfers me to another state, and I go work for the guy who teaches me the most about how to have interpersonal relationships.
wow, yep,
Right. So the guy who says that stuff doesn't matter. What's really important is how you treat the human.
mm,
And the people that worked for that guy, my colleagues, we would do anything for him, right?
yeah,
Just he was the guy who, and I learned the value of being there for your people, like the people that are in your charge. He was there in charge of the people that were in his charge, right?
yep,
He was there to support them, and he spent all of his days. The items weren't his thing at all. It was
yeah,
the people and what was going on with them and how they're doing. So like I think there's a gift in as you go through and meet different leaders that you can bring to your characteristics.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
And then, you know, at least in some of the older leadership literature, you had Blake and Mouton were the names of these individuals, but they really focused on, okay, you have that high process person and the high relationship person. So you do both really, really, really well. There's that individual who will grind and get incredible results, and the results will be meticulous, but everyone's miserable. And there's that individual who they're friends with everyone and they're a great person, but maybe they aren't producing the best results. So it's that high, high people, high process, or, high relationships, high task. That leader, I'm sure you've had some individuals where they were like, I'm going to work, you're going to work hard. And it's not because I want to be a jerk. It's because I have really, really high expectations and I believe in you. And then, so they were that person that held you to that standard, but you also, when your head hit the pillow, you knew they cared about you. They wanted you to develop. They want you to grow. And they knew you as a human being. You weren't just some cog in their wheel getting things done with just transactional. All the research would suggest, if you have a relationship with the people, and that doesn't mean that they're at your house for a barbecue every Wednesday night. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying, they have a family, they've got 3 kids, when their birthday is, what they like to do on the weekends, and there's a relationship there, and
Mhm.
what their aspirations are. Oof, combine that with those high standards and then explain the why of, hey, I'm holding you to high standards, but I see excellence in you. And there's a lot of opportunity here and I want you to be good. So I'm going to push, but it's only because I care and I see the opportunity, right? I mean, boom.
So let's talk a little bit about different leaderships at different times in the organization,
Okay.
right? I mean, so there's kind of like that, the beginning entrepreneur, right? Maybe you're a solopreneur, right? You're out there, really doing something. Now you get your first couple of employees and you're digging your way. You're trying to build an actual company. It's not just you working anymore. Now it's a team of people, but that company and the environment, that climate changes, and some of that leadership stuff has to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think a couple things come to mind as you're, obviously this could be a whole conversation right here. I had a gentleman on my podcast from Google last week. I released the episode recently, and his phrase was, teams are harder than tech, which was kind of an interesting phrase. I really liked that, right? As soon as you add humans, there's an infinite number of variables between the two of us, and then add 5 more, and there's an infinite number of variables. And how there's no person we can call in the world to say, "Hey, how do you help the 5 of us gel? What are the 5 steps we need to take to make that happen?" No. Hopefully, you're a strong leader. Who you are is a strong leader. You've got that really strong foundation, but that entrepreneur is who had that great tech idea is now tasked with building a team. And again, who you are is how you lead. If they aren't skilled in building teams, having difficult conversations, negotiating well, if they aren't skilled at inspiring others, well, that's what shows up. If they aren't skilled at leading a meeting, that's what shows up. And so, unless that individual is really trying to become skilled in the work of running a business, leading a team, designing culture. So let's talk about that. I mean, holy buckets. Like I had a wonderful gentleman on my show, and he was talking about how he was designing for engagement. And that phrasing was just beautiful too. Like he's literally designing the roles in his organization so that people stay engaged. And so I think you design culture also. And if you have someone who's not skilled and even having an eye on the fact or doesn't even know that culture takes some design, you got to water that plant a little bit. Well, that's who they are. That's what shows up, and adventures ensue.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's for sure that in lies, the dichotomy of when we break the team down, and there's a break in that teamwork and that ability to work together, right? That could be as toxic as
Oh yeah.
right. That could be a toxic work environment.
Yep. Yep. And if people aren't skilled in having difficult conversations, in creating what's called psychological safety. Have you heard that term by any chance, Anthony?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, if I'm a leader and let's say I'm bringing the group in to do problem solving, and someone says an idea and I make some kind of snide comment, I've literally shut down dialogue as the leader. I have not provided a place where people feel like they can bring their opinions to the table, unless you have a really brave employee or a couple of them that will kind of take up a lot of airtime. But I mean, it's a very delicate situation. It's a very delicate situation. And again, leaders create the weather. In that brainstorming session, if you have a leader that's either doing all the talking or driving towards whatever they think their idea is, they've already decided before they walked into the room, or it's an individual who makes snide comments or shuts down ideas, well, you know, literally, you're flying blind. It's called CEO disease. A guy named Dan Goleman coined that term, where no one's going to filter up bad news to you. You're going to be looking at things through a very, very limited filter because everything's filtered by the time it gets to you. So if you don't set that tone, if you don't create that weather pattern of like, look, I don't care who's right. I just want us to come to the best guess answer. It doesn't matter if it's my idea. It doesn't matter if it's your idea. We're going to put it in the middle of the table, have the knockdown drag out, bring your voice, bring your perspective. Let's go. And then what do we think? Bezos was kind of famous for saying that he would let the team have the debate and he'd kind of watch that and then he would speak towards the end, which is an interesting perspective, right? I mean, is that always appropriate? I don't know, but I've been in plenty of meetings where the leader walked in, kind of told the team the answer out of the gates and didn't create any space for people to say. And then, of course, you have the meeting after the meeting at the water cooler, and everyone's like, "Well, this is going to be this is
Yeah.
this is a nightmare, right?"
Being able to sit back and, I think that's one of the gifts of a great leader is you got to feel the room, right? You got to know
Yep.
those microseconds because there's times when I want to listen to the entire room and then come in with an opinion at the end of it, or allow people to really to create and voice their feelings. Then there's times when the room's just not ready for it, right? The room
Yeah.
sometimes just needs someone to say, "Yep, we're gonna go that way," and I think that takes some real conscious behavior of knowing your team, knowing when
Yes.
to interject that, knowing when a dialogue right now is not going to work because whatever.
Time or whatever else it is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
time, impact, people, mood. I mean, the weather, right? It could be
Yeah. Yep.
right. There's some real frustration in there, and so someone just needs to grab the reins and go. All right, we're going to go this way, and there'll be other times when we can open it up, but I think that's real conscious behavior from a leader's
Yes.
standing there. And so let's go back to who you are, right? I think that's one of the gifts of great leadership work, at least for me, is noticing that when I work on me,
Yep.
right, the Anthony model, this being, and when I really work on my fears, my anxieties, the things that frustrate me, the things that are that I've been carrying with me,
Yep.
some of those little Tony inside stuff. Uh,
Nice. Oh,
yeah,
Anthony, this is awesome. This is like beautiful right here because you're tapping into something incredibly important, which another aspect of who you are is your history.
yeah.
So I bring that with me everywhere I go, and the good, bad, and ugly of that. And for those of us who have experienced trauma, or for those of us who had some unideal experiences in our background, those carry forward. And if we haven't done some of that work, if we haven't examined that, if we haven't explored that, tried to make sense of that, it shows up and you put us in a position of authority now, and my mistrust for other human beings translates to micromanagement. My insecurity about my identity, my insecurity about my self-worth shows up in micromanagement. So it shows up.
That's
Right?
right.
So I mean, that whole becoming is better than being. I'm not putting this on any listeners, so don't take it this way, please. But I have a psychologist and I've had him for 17 years, and I go on a walk every 2 weeks and I speak with him, and it's it's, for me, it's been a very, very important relationship in helping me. Again, to go back to parenting for a second, I'm trying to be the best version of myself for my wife, for my kids. And I didn't, everything wasn't perfect growing up. I didn't have the best things modeled all of the time, but certainly not who I would want to be some of the time. So how do I be someone different? But I still see residual in my behavior at times of what was modeled or whatever else, right? And So that's my place. And then my wife and I walk every day. I have a mentor. So I'm constantly reading, listening to books. So I'm trying to become a better version of self, because you just hit on something so important, that history. It comes with us, the good, bad, and ugly of it, right? And that little Tony is there,
That's right.
right?
No, God, literally, I think that's the next level of work that, you go through. All right. So as a beginning entrepreneur, as a beginning leader, there's some easy ones to figure out, right? You can get 7 Habits, some great books you can read, and how to go
Yep.
from good to great, hey, the torture of great is really good. And I can start to
Hmm.
look at and those feel like little nuggets. I can figure out rocks, right? All right, what are my
Yep.
big boulders? What are my small boulders? Right? I can figure out. There's some great books that will give me some cool techniques that will
Yes.
help me in leadership. Which my judgment is great for the beginning part, but to go that next level, to continue going, right? To go to even further, right? To get to the place where, you know, look, small little company, you got, that mindset will get you there, and some of that stuff will get you there.
Yep.
But to really get to the next level, to go to a place where um, you couldn't even imagine you wanted to go, right?
Yeah.
In the beginning entrepreneur, that you couldn't see it from where you started.
Yep.
You start to work on those things, and I think that's the real great gift. Like when I find other entrepreneurs and other leaders who would go through that, I'm like, "Whoa, wait, what do you mean? I do like a men's group or a therapy group or whatever it is that helps you get access to that work,
Yep.
right? And everybody has different access points. I mean, some might be through their
Yep.
religion, some might have it, whatever.
Totally.
Yeah, whatever.
It could be
Yeah,
your faith, it could be mindfulness, it could be yoga, it could be whatever it is. It could be a best friend, a mentor. Yes, right? What is it? Who cares what it is? Is it in, are you in process and like trying to become a better version? Right?
yeah, whatever system. I always
Yeah.
look at them as systems, right?
Yes. Yeah.
There's
Yeah. I
a
love that
technology,
phrasing.
right? It's a technology, a system that helps me
Yep.
get to a place where I start to notice those things you were talking about, that those
Yeah.
fears, anxieties, that trauma.
Yep.
My parents. It was funny about my parents. I never found their book. Right. They,
Mm.
they had no parenting book. Right. I looked around the house. I couldn't find any drawers. There's no chest. There's no chest. There's nothing up on a tall shelf. There was no parenting book. I was looking for it when my parents are passing away. I'm like, they got to have it hidden somewhere here. The parenting book.
The
No
book.
parenting book.
What would the
Right.
title have been? What would the title of that book been?
I don't know, but I mean, based on my parents, it might have been School of Hard Knocks. But and I didn't get one. None of us got them,
Yeah.
but now I'm starting to notice that there are some books. There are some books in some of the people that I now surround myself with. Right,
Yeah.
they give me access to words, language, and actions that maybe my parents didn't have access to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And, I just finished a podcast episode with 3 faculty members at the Naval War College. So this would be surprising for some listeners, but they spend so much time ensuring that soldier is ready, for technically ready. They spend a lot of time on that soldier being physically ready. But what the branches of the military are starting to think about is this person spiritually ready? Are they ready from a grounded in who they are, because we are going to place them in a stressful situation? And what is that foundation that so have we prepared them to have their family, right, and in that space? And I think that's been like an untouchable topic in the past. It might have been a little woo woo or kind of soft, but for me, it's real. It's very, very real, because there's another guest I had. She used the phrasing performance ready. Are these leaders performance ready? Because as you know, as a leader, it's incredibly difficult work. It's not easy work. You are Olympians doing very difficult work. And are people performance ready? And that means holistically. That's not
sure,
just they're
right.
skilled in the work and they're physically fit. The whole them. And so that was a fascinating conversation, Anthony, because I wasn't really expecting that. I wasn't expecting them to talk about mindfulness, spiritual readiness, right? I mean, just all of the spirituality. And they don't care what flavor of spirituality. It could be Scientology.
Sure, right.
What are you grounded in? What
Yeah.
are you grounded
Yeah.
in, and are you grounded? And it could be that maybe it's just a set of values. If it's not Jesus Christ, that's okay. What are your values, and what are we going to ground you in? So I thought that was so awesome. It was just fun.
My religion is different than other people's religions. And look, I obviously love my religion, right? I grew up with
Yeah.
a strong faith and a belief, and right. But as I've grown up, I now honor other people's paths, and I've gone around the world and I've studied their other people's religions and find some great joy in seeing their culture and their history. And it's different than mine, right? Look,
Yes. Yeah.
I got Jesus in my life. I've got and I don't make them wrong for not having my beliefs. And I think for too long, religion has killed many, many people over their beliefs, and we've beaten people over the head with it. I'm like, hey, look, if it's working for you and you have access to your God that works for you, that's ultimately what I want for people to have, is if a place
Yeah.
where, hey, I'm not. First thing I know is, uh, I'm not God, right? There's, I'm not here to tell you what to do, and you'll get there when you need to get there. But what I can do is, I really want to honor you and your path,
Yep.
and if I can be of guidance and support, and like what you're doing, what I love about what you're doing is, look, it's more complicated than ever before to be a leader, right?
Yes.
Look,
Yes.
your grandfather as a leader, or your great grandfather as a leader, different, right? Today, as a leader, I'm asked to do so many more things than ever before. I've got to be, I got to lead a company, a social media platform. I got online presence. I've got my own branding to do. Then I got to be a father and now I got to be woke and a father and aware. And then I have all these other roles that my judgment is my father and grandfather didn't have,
Yeah.
that, it's getting, which is great in some respects. Look, it's really great because we have access to more stuff that we did, but
Yeah.
it's also a bit overwhelming. So when I get a coach like you, when I bring a coach in like you that helps grow an organization, or grow my organization, or grow me, it's a gift, right? It helps someone who is shoulder to shoulder with you through these tough conversations.
Yep.
And Scott, as you coach with people, let's talk a little bit about the engagement. How do you coach? Let's talk about the perfect clients for you. What in your field, and you're bringing on somebody. If a listener wants a coach and they want to say, "Hey, Scott, I want to bring it," talk a little bit about how that engagement works.
Sure. Sure. My work primarily, I work with executive teams. I do a lot of workshops. I do a lot of presentations. I do a lot of keynotes. Now, I have some friends who love the work around coaching, and I do a small amount of my business is coaching. But I can't emphasize enough the value of finding that right therapist, that right coach. We could call them a thinking partner. I don't care what you call them. Just an individual. It's not someone you're going to sit around and just kind of commiserate with about how everyone else is terrible. This is someone who's challenging you to be a better version of you, to look at things from different perspectives, to kind of put the mirror up and say, well, what do you need to own? These are those individuals that really help with that process. So I was speaking with a former Major League Baseball player yesterday who has, the transition from the MLB into life can be a very, very rough transition in any sport. We see it with Olympians. You see it where someone's identity is really kind of enmeshed with whatever it is they're incredible at. And so he loves walking alongside people and helping them with that process. And I had the conversation with him yesterday. He just founded this organization, and it's incredible kind of how he's designed it, how he's built it. But I would say to listeners, one way to know that you're getting the right coach is, are they certified by the International Coach Federation? So ICF, are they ICF certified? So anyone can call themselves a coach, but are you with someone who is certified and has experience in what it is you need help with? So just like anything else, I think finding that right person is critical. It's important. Don't be afraid to fire someone quickly if they're not doing it for you. The most important thing is that you have that outlet. So can't emphasize the importance of that enough. Who are your thinking partners? Because leadership can be incredibly lonely, and a
Yeah.
lot of decisions are rumbling around in your head. A lot of questions are rumbling around in your head. So what's that? It could be a group. Sometimes it's a small group of executives that connect and meet and talk. Just what is that outlet for you?
Well, I mean, having a great coach, a mentor, for me often is about creating new language that I didn't have.
Yes,
Right.
100%. Yes. Yep.
Someone who can see it and help me language what's going on in
Yes.
ways that I couldn't see it. And then all of a sudden it's not like rocket science. Sometimes it's literally, it's not like I'm broken like this. It's usually just a little bit of I'm
Yep.
just off kilter, right? And I need to figure out, oh, let's look at that, right? How, some of the best coaches I've had have done some crazy things that really have been amazing. Like one coach, she locked me in my office. She literally locked me in the office. She said, "Yeah, sorry, you're going out." And I thought to myself, "Oh my God, this is great. I get to focus and people won't bother me all day." And she's like, "No, we're locking you because you walk out there and bother everybody else." I go, "What?" She's like, "No, no, no, yeah, yeah, yeah. You hire these great people and you walk out and you step on their air hose all day." I'm like, "How dare you talk to? I paid you to say that to me?" And she's like, "Yeah, you're like, you don't
That's
realize
why
it.
you're paying me.
Yeah, you've got this big S on your chest. You can't wait to pull it out and show everybody what a, Superman you are. And
Yeah.
you've hired these great people who just, and let them do what they do. And all of a sudden that gift of stepping back and
Yep.
allowing them to be that way. Look, it's not easy when you like my
Oh,
younger entrepreneurship. A big part of me as a leader was I really was building or trying to justify to the world who I am
well,
in my leadership. Right. I mean,
back to
I
our old previous conversation, right? That
yeah,
behavior came from somewhere. It was
yeah,
meeting some need. So
yeah.
you have someone who can say, where's this intense desire to, micromanage, or at least, those tendencies I was hearing in your behavior there. Where's that coming from? Why the intense desire, right?
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Right. Like from when you see that, when I first saw that, oh, look at that little lower me. That's little Tony in there.
Yeah.
Uh, he just wants to be seen. Right.
Yes.
I'm trying to be seen. And a lot of the justification I have was, showing you that I knew something.
Yeah.
And, there was two things I realized that we dug into it. I realized I was trying to show you I wasn't stupid. Right.
Hmm.
And where did that come from? And they dug back and like, I could find that on a playground somewhere. And I want to show you I wasn't poor.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
I was trying to defend those two ways of being. And like here, that right there is 10,000. By the way, whoever's listening, there's $10,000 worth of therapy right there that got me to that being. And you start noticing, all right, in my leadership, I'm trying to defend those two ways of being
But it's
and
probably
help.
made you hundreds of thousands more.
Right. Hey, what does that cost me to the people that I'm with
Yeah.
in the interaction with them when I keep showing up trying to defend that way of being? And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden you look at it and go, huh,
Yep.
right,
And you
right.
put that, yeah, you put that, I don't, the phrase is not damaged. That's not the word, but you put that person in a position of authority. And if they haven't, because again, why do people seek out some of these roles? Well, sometimes it's altruistic reasons, but sometimes it's to fill a need for them. Well, that's kind of interesting. And if that's who they are, that's what shows up. And that's why that Bob Hogan quote is just so incredible, because it matters. It matters who you are. It matters greatly who you are, to our family, to our team members, to the people we're coaching. Josh and I were talking about that yesterday. I mean, it matters greatly. And so I have infinite energy for the conversation, because I have just massive amounts of respect for people like you who have raised your hand, said, I'll enter the arena, and then, have learned through the process and are kind of looking within and saying, okay, um, how do I take me to the next level? And then I think I do believe in my heart that that can be a great foundation from which then to build further, right?
By by far, that's the biggest gift is that I don't have to run around and arrange all the pieces, right?
Mm,
I'm not the actor, the cameraman, the lighting guy, the sound guy. I can allow people to do that, and I can stand back. And the gift that I am is the creator, right? Great leaders
yep,
about bringing great ideas to me today. Great leadership is about bringing the billions and billions of ideas of the world to the solutions that are needed,
yep.
right? But when I run around fixing the lights and doing the sound and doing all these other things, I can't, there's no, I can't create vision and I can't
Mm,
create that. And, that's what organizations need. At least as far as I can see is that they need great vision and guidance and creativity to solve. Look, growing idea, this chasm of stuff is just a nightmare,
Yeah.
right?
It's good phrasing. Yeah.
Right. It's
It's
just
good. It's a good
there's a
phrasing.
nightmare,
Yeah.
right? The organization needs me to bring solutions every day, and when I get shut off because of behaviors or that little Anther, little Tony guy in there,
Yeah.
I'm not doing my organization what it needs, and that's fun. I really love where we're going with that. Um, if people want to bring you in for a leadership seminar or want to hear about your podcast, let's talk a little bit about how they get your coordinates.
Sure. So scottjallen.net is where I am on the web, or Scott J. Allen on LinkedIn. You can find me there as well. And those are probably the two best ways to get a hold of me. The podcast is called Phronesis. That's a word that Aristotle came up with that just means practical wisdom. So it's called Phronesis, Practical Wisdom for Leaders. And again, I might be speaking with the former Prime Minister of Greece, a nonprofit founder, kind of everything in between, someone who's doing some work in the inner city of Chicago. I mean, just fascinating conversations with people who are trying to make a difference in the world and also understand this thing called leadership better. So it's been a lot of fun. As you know, podcasting is incredible. I've met so many wonderful people, and it systematizes my learning, right? Literally every quote I said to you today was what someone has said to me.
I get it. I get it. I learned through
Yeah.
books and even more through the podcast.
Yeah.
For me, it's like reading their book
Yeah.
and having the interview and getting to have that gift. And it's been
Yeah.
such a joy having a podcast, working on the podcast, and then having all these guests. For sure, there's a gift in that for me as a leader, and I get to bring these ideas back to the organization.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun. So that's great. We'll make sure that all that stuff is down below. Make sure that everybody gets access to that. And as you know, grateful to have you on the show.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for the good work you're doing in the world.
Thanks. Audience members, last week we had another amazing week of downloads. It was crazy what you guys did, and the numbers. And I think we had 33,000 YouTubers this week, and it's like, okay, I'm really proud of that. But I noticed a lot of you guys made it to the end of the podcast, but you weren't subscribers. If you could take a second and like and subscribe, it makes the world to Alyssa and Joe and all the team in the background that are putting this podcast together and really work tirelessly to find amazing guests like Scott. And, and when you guys like and subscribe, it helps us get great guests like Scott. So if you could do that now, and also if you could put any comment down there, tell us you like it, or you hated my haircut, or you didn't like, or whatever. I love the comments. I love what we get from you guys and the feedback we get from each of our audience members. So if you could put that down below, and we'll make sure Scott, myself, and our team will make sure that we answer all those. And just we're grateful for all of you listening. Thanks.